Good morning and welcome to another Metalogix Quick Take session, this time about the Diagnostic Manager tool. Today we're going to be talking about component architecture from a very, very high level. We're just going to be talking concepts and theory. In future Quick Take sessions, we'll actually take a look at the tool and kind of tinker around with these different components, but for now we're just going to focus on identifying and discussing the architecture from the highest point. As some of you may know, my name is Roy Martinez. I'm the lead Metalogix support representative for the Diagnostic Manager tool. I have quite a few years of experience working with this tool since its original inception, and I've thusly had the opportunity to watch the tool's features grow and expand in response to all the demand from the field and underlying technology advancements since the 1.0 version. I've had, I've seen pretty much everything there is so far with the Diagnostic Manager tool, and I'm hoping to share some of that experience and expertise with you guys. Just a quick reminder about quick takes in general. As we go through, we're going to spend about 15 to 20 minutes just talking concepts, and then at the last 10 or 15 minutes or so, I'll allow some time for questions to come in. You can shoot those in via chat in the GoToMeeting or webinar, and I'm happy to answer those questions at the end of the session. So let's jump right in. So Diagnostic Manager architecture from the top down, and I hope that everyone can hear me just okay. So let's just move on here. So we've got these different things happening with Diagnostic Manager, and the cool thing about DM from an architectural perspective is that it's pretty much agentless, and by that I mean there are only a couple of pieces, and they're all optional that actually get installed to your farm. Everything else is done remotely via remote WMI calls. As you can see here, we've got a management console component. This represents the UI that the user interfaces with, the actual application that you run from the start menu, for instance. We've got a collection service, which is a Windows service that runs in the background on your server. And we've got a repository database that stores metric information collected by that collection service. So as you can see, this collection service component is making calls out to your different web front ends. It's making calls out to the SQL servers, and it's making calls to the actual databases themselves via SQL. We use remote WMI calls to get server level metrics from the operating system on your web front ends, application servers, and the like. We use WMI SQL queries to get the SQL metrics from the actual SQL Server machines, and then we use some direct SQL queries to get stuff out of your system and SharePoint databases to pull back those metrics. So digging a little bit deeper under the hood, when we talk about the management console, obviously we're talking about the UI element, and this can be installed on multiple machines that share a SQL collection service. And each SharePoint administrator can use the console to help manage their portion of the SharePoint farm. Thusly, multiple management consoles can connect to the same collection service at the same time. And we'll see a little bit more about that as the slides move on. But the key features here to remember are the console can deploy to any Windows OS up to 2012 R2 or whatever the latest and greatest is. I don't think it goes farther back than Windows 2000. It's a centralized, intuitive user interface that lets you configure the Diagnostic Manager tool. You can select SharePoint farms to collect data from, as well as pages to monitor. You can review that collected data and analyze your SharePoint deployment over a period of time. And each console reads data from the repository database and shows that graphically with a UI. So essentially all the metrics and all the data we're looking at within the console is essentially being read out of the tables that we've written to in our repository database. And there's a little bit of redundancy here in my slide. My apologies. Just a reminder, we can deploy to any Windows OS. So the console is pretty cut and dry, but it's really the collection service that does all the work here. So first and foremost, we're collecting data from the SharePoint farm or farms via those different methods, right? So if we refer back to that first slide, we'd see we're using WMI calls to get to all those different servers. This can run on any workstation, even independent of the console. In other words, the console and the collection service do not necessarily have to be on the same machine. You can have a you can have several different servers hosting different components depending on your availability and needs. This service must be running in order to execute our jobs. In other words, if the collection service goes down, you're not going to collect any data, right? Should be pretty self-explanatory. The data that we do collect gets recorded into our repository database. So this is going to be metric information, i.e. Data points at the time of collection, and this is going to be alert statuses. In other words, once we collect data about the state of affairs in your servers, we then apply some rules to that data and trigger alerts based on your configuration. The easiest example would be if your memory usage comes back as 80%, maybe you have an alert triggered to say send an email when anything's over 75%. That alert status information is stored in that repository database. Your enterprise network can have multiple collection services installed, but the management console can only contact a single collection service at a time. In other words, we might have several farms in our enterprise, each of which has its own independent installation of Diagnostic Manager. That's totally doable, but just keep in mind that the management console to collection service is a 1-to-1 ratio. Furthermore, you can absolutely monitor multiple farms within a single installation of Diagnostic Manager, so whether this is actually necessary is completely dependent upon your environmental needs. Over here I've noted that if the collection service encounters errors, it automatically logs them to the Windows event logs, and then you can use the event viewer to review those logs when errors occur. Additionally, we have our own internal collection service log that logs internal error messages. And furthermore, often just reviewing your alerts will give you a good indication of things that are happening. We do record some internal mechanisms via our alert statuses. All this will be covered in a future quick take. So a little bit about ports and connectivity. So we know we've got a console, we know we've got a collection service, and we know they work in tandem. So the console uses ports 5292 and 5294 to communicate with the collection service. That means that the collection service must be listening on those two ports in order for us to connect to and communicate with it. In other words, the server that hosts the collection service must have 5292 and 5294 open and receiving TCP/IP connections, i.e. a telnet test, for instance, should be successful. You must allow outbound communications on port 5292 and 5293 from the computer that hosts a management console to the computer that hosts the collection service. And then you must allow inbound communications on 5292 and 94 on the computer that hosts the collection service, as I just stated. That collection service uses the Windows management interface to collect information about the servers in monitored SharePoint farms. If you want to collect information about your servers, you must allow communications from the computer that hosts the collection service to the servers in monitored SharePoint farms over these ports. Now this is actually going to be, this is another little tidbit that will probably get its own quick take in the future, but suffice it to say, in order for this tool to do what it does, we have to rely on the ability to make remote WMI calls. And remote WMI calls are kind of a concept in and of themselves. I think, and don't quote me on this in this particular quick take, but I believe that by default WMI connects over 153, port 153, and then dynamically assigns a random port from that point to collect that info. Again, we'll dig deeper into that concept in a future quick take, but for now, just suffice it to say that we rely on WMI remote connectivity in order to make our metrics collections. Usually, it's not an issue. The only time you ever really see this become an issue is when you have a really secured SQL server or other heightened security in your environment. And then finally, when the collection service performs page availability, load time, or page component analysis tests on monitored pages, it uses whatever port is specified in the URLs you supply. And if there's no port specified, the default web server port is used. So we're just relying on whatever you've got set up and configured in your environment via IIS and other. So the next piece of the puzzle is the repository database. So this guy stores configuration information, statistical and collection service collected data. i.e. farm topology information, what servers are out there. Collected metrics, what are the state of affairs in your servers as of the time of our metric collections. Grooming configurations, how long am I keeping metric data in this repository? And then alerting configurations I alluded to earlier, settings and configurations that determine what type of actions get taken in response to metric values. Each collection service uses one unique repository. So again, it's a one-to-one correlation between collection service and repository. So the DM repository stores the data that the collection service collects from your SharePoint deployment, and then you use the management console to review that data and to manage repository grooming. And you can specify the Microsoft SQL Server database to host this repository when you install the collection service. In other words, just to further expand on the distributed installation concept, again, this repository can exist on any SQL Server machine that you want, on any instance, as long as it's available on the network. I guess the point I'm driving home is you can truly have a really distributed installation by having your repository on one SQL Server, your management console on a workstation, and then a collection service collecting from a particular application server if desired. So there's a lot of versatility and options in terms of distributing the installation. So the last piece of the puzzle I'm going to cover today is the component analysis solution. And this is an optional farm-side WSP. It's deployed as a WSP into the SharePoint environment via Central Admin. And it provides specific information regarding web control and web part performance on monitored pages. So it helps the collection service gather data about the page load times, the solution load times, ULS log entries, and various other information. We install this solution on a web front end in your farm, and just like any other solution, SharePoint will automatically replicate it to the other WFEs in the farm. This is just a standard WSP deployment. So we do have a little installer wrapped up with the tool that you can run on your WFE to deploy this. Alternatively, we give you the raw WSPs in our program files directory if you want to manage it as you would any other WSP, either via STS-ADM or PowerShell or whatever the case may be. But yeah, what it does is it provides essentially deep dive information about monitored pages primarily. In other words, it'll, by default, when you add a monitored page, you'll see load times for the page. But if you want, if those load times are high and you want to see what specific components are adding to that load time, switching on the component analysis will provide us information on load times for web controls, load times for HTML controls, load times for web parts, etc. And that, of course, is, you have to have this WSP installed and deployed to the web application hosting the site in question. So, yeah, so just gives us some additional information about the monitored pages. And then, additionally, as a side note, the component analysis solution's secondary role is to provide the window into the farm to give us information about ULS log entries. It's kind of doing a dual duty, so to speak. So that kind of concludes everything in terms of the overview from a top-down. I wanted to just quickly go over this first slide once more, just to reiterate everything now that we've got some details about each of these components. So our workflow is every 6 minutes by default, our collection service will poll all the servers in the farm topology for the farm, all the WFEs, other application servers, all the SQL servers, and the databases within the SQL server. And what he does is he's going to make those remote WMI connections, basically pull back performance counters from WMI from each of these scopes. He's going to store those into the repository and then do some work on them based on the alert configurations you've set up in your console. And once all that information is processed, in our console, we'll be indirectly reading from the repository through the collection service to see those statuses. So not only will we see the metrics, but we'll also see the alert statuses triggered in response to the metric values based on the thresholds we set. And again, we'll cover a lot of this stuff in more detail in future quick takes, But that is kind of it for the architecture from the top down. So at this point, I'd like to open the floor to any questions anyone might have. And if there aren't any, we can adjourn. All right. Well, I don't see any questions coming in, but as usual, you're free to reach out to the support team at Metalogix.com. You can go to our portal, open a case, or you can call us at 202-609-9100 if you have any questions about Diagnostic Manager from a top-down perspective or about this architecture, or about how to find information about other concepts or topics you're interested in with this tool. Again, be on the lookout for future quick take sessions that will do further deep diving into the specific, specifically the console and how to set up your installation and configure your alerts for first-time use. With that, I'd like to thank you all for joining me. Again, my name is Roy Martinez. If you have any questions, just reach out to us. Have a great day.